If it were up to you to solve an environmental problem, how would you do it? Everyone has heard of an entrepreneur, but most of you probably haven't heard of an enviropreneur. Hank Fisher is one of these people. Hank was worried about wolves. The gray wolf was on the endangered species list and extinct in the American West. This was bad for the local ecology. Wolves were needed to keep herds of elk and other animals from becoming overpopulated. So Hank made it his mission to help bring wolves back to their natural habitat. Federal officials were already working on a plan to reintroduce wolves to Yellowstone National Park, but Hank wasn't sure that plan was going to work very well. Not only was it going to take too long and cost too much, but it made a lot of local people angry. For the benefit of the local ecology, Hank knew that wolf advocates needed to win over private landowners so that wolves could roam beyond the park. So Hank began meeting with his biggest opponents, the ranchers surrounding Yellowstone. He thought if he could understand their concerns, he could figure out a way to address them. His first gathering was in an old schoolhouse in Idaho. Hank describes entering the room and being met by a sea of cowboy hats. When he started his speech, a rancher stood up and interrupted him, bellowing out, "It's easy for you to be a wolf lover. It doesn't cost you a dime. It's the people who own livestock who end up paying for wolves." This was really a eureka moment for Hank. He realized that the ranchers' opposition to wolves was an economic issue. They feared losing livestock to hungry wolves. So if ranchers could be compensated for their losses, their opposition might dwindle. Hank began looking for ways to make that happen. He teamed up with Defenders of Wildlife to raise private donations for his fund so that he could pay back ranchers when they lost livestock to predation. Hank also helped develop further incentives for ranchers to tolerate wolves on their land. For example, ranchers who allowed a wolf den on their property were eligible for additional compensation. Through these efforts, he was able to start turning a rare species into an asset for landowners rather than a liability. Soon, the newly reintroduced wolves began to flourish. Hank had become an environmental entrepreneur. By observing the incentives at work, he was able to find a solution that won the voluntary cooperation of local people. And that meant he could help wolves even when the expensive legal and bureaucratic solutions were failing them. You may think that this is just one small example, but this really is happening all over the world. In Africa, South America, and Asia, the nonprofit I work for, PERC, offers support and ideas to entrepreneurs like these who want to make a real difference for the environment. Don't you think that if we can inspire more enviropreneurs, we can solve some of the greatest environmental challenges? Today, wolves are thriving in the West. Just last year, they were removed from the endangered species list. Hank made a difference by thinking beyond the status quo. He found a way to turn opponents into allies. Do you think you could do the same?